Hail, weary podcast traveler and well met. I see your adventure through the depths of the internet has led you here to sliding into the DMs. Now, this is not a podcast for the dirty boys, as the name implies, but rather a D&D advice and creative concepts podcast where these three nerds take your questions, suggestions, and pop culture influences to turn them into playable content, making goofs all along the way. This show is for everyone, from level 1 adventurers just stepping into the realm of D&D to the level 19 Dragon Slayer. Their aim is to help both players and DMs alike. Even Gary Gygax needed help sometimes. Just ask Dave Arneson. So step into our tavern, take off your cloak of Elvenkind, and spend some time sliding into the DMs.
Good morrow, travelers. The name's Grix Stormscales, High Paladin of the God Torm. I ask that you sacrifice yourself in battle and roll for initiative.
3.
7.
16.
All right. Cameron, you are starting the show tonight.
Well, hello, everybody. My name's Cameron, also known as Bored as Noodles, and welcome to Sliding into the DMs.
God damn it, your voice is so sexy.
Oh, it's so glossy.
So I don't even know how to talk after that. My name is Trevor. I am the continuity conductor on this show. I try to keep Bruce on a singular track.
Good luck.
And as Cameron said, he is joining us tonight as our special guest. You can look him up as Bored as Noodles on TikTok. And now, I guess, Bruce can introduce himself.
And I'm Bruce, the mad scientist. That's why I laugh as a mad scientist.
Is it?
So, welcome to Sliding into the DMs. Let's get going. You rolled the highest. Is there anything you want to talk about there, Bored as Noodles?
Well, just one thing.
Okay.
Be true to yourself, love yourself, live happy. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Perfect. So thank you for listening to Sliding into the DMs. So that was our last little quip, and have a good night. No, I'm joking.
Okay, well,
so,
Cameron, you just played your first ever D&D game the other night, which those of you that don't know, you can listen to that here live on our show. Not live. It didn't happen live, but it did happen. We recorded Cameron's first ever D&D adventure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that adventure, what you liked about what happened, what you disliked, things you think would have been fun to do, or ideas that popped in your head that you maybe want to do next time you play.
You know, that's actually a great question. I was thinking about that a lot, and my coworkers had actually asked me about it. I did not know what to expect exactly. I've read lots of memes. I've seen lots of stuff about D&D. Always been curious about it. Never found a group. Never found the, I guess, guts to search for my own group to play. Didn't know what to expect at all. But after only maybe 30 to 40 minutes of explanation, because my brain is slow, and then another hour of playing, I feel like I picked it up rather quickly. And I understand now why everybody says you have to have a really good DM, because the way that our DM, our mastermind, was explaining and describing everything, it really felt like you were inside this adventure and this story. So I really did enjoy it a lot and look forward to doing it more.
wow, well, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. Like, I'm glad that you had fun. I'm glad that you enjoyed the gameplay. It was kind of a weird one shot I pulled up, so I'm glad that it went off pretty good, because I hadn't played that one shot before, which was called The Wolves of Welton. If anyone wants to look that up and play it, it's basically, we played it straight from the page, straight from the book. So if you guys want to go find that, it's just The Wolves of Welton. It's a free PDF. I think it's like 4 pages long, and you can go play that yourselves. But I'm glad that you guys had fun. Second part of Trevor's question there that I would like to ask you again, kind of get your elaboration on. But was there anything that popped into your mind after you played that, of something you might like to play as, or a different kind of game you'd like to play, or any like specific theme or something?
Well, I definitely it really made me interested in all of it. I've got a few friends that from TikTok that we talk pretty regularly. Specifically, a friend of mine named Jack. He showed me a collection of stacks and stacks of different D&D, like what do they call them?
Books, stat blocks.
Yeah, books like adventure logs, whatever. He used a specific term, but he had a bunch of them from like the early like 1990s and stuff and on. Like,
okay.
Old ones. I was
Some
like,
of the
that's
first
really
editions.
Cool that you have like all these different versions, and not even just D&D. There were ones that were named, I don't even know, different kinds of adventures that weren't specifically Dungeons and Dragons, and I was very curious about.
Pathfinder and stuff like that too.
Pathfinder was one. Yes.
Yeah, those are all just I think they're called play systems or game systems. The earlier stuff in D&D is called Dungeons, or it's D&D Advanced, I believe is what it's called. But anyways, yeah, you said you were just kind of interested in all of it. Is there a certain theme that you tend to gravitate towards, like steampunk or medieval or space or futuristic? I'm just trying to get an idea, because if we can, and if you're interested in playing another game, I'm sure we can put together another one-shot or maybe even like a mini campaign or something kind of based around that theme, so that way you're, you know, a little bit more comfortable with what you're jumping into, because we just kind of threw it at you and said, hey, make a character, and then we're going to throw you into a game.
I mean, I thought it was done very well. I thought it was a great introduction into D&D because it's exactly what my mind kind of expected. Something that's more like a village setting, more like medieval, to that lines. Now, obviously, my kind of favorite sort of genre, per to say, is like dystopian, like BioShock specifically.
Oh,
like
okay.
A torn, just
post-apocalyptic
type.
That's
setting.
the word.
Those are some of my favorites.
A Fallout, BioShock style.
I've wanted to run one of those games before, because I have a couple ideas on something I would like to do for those. I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately, and some of them have this kind of really cool, gritty feel to them that I think would fit perfect, or at least the idea that I get from them would fit perfect for a kind of like dystopian, you know, after cataclysm world that I think would be really fun to kind of do. So that may be a possibility.
Or like Alien, Dead Space, like
that
kind of stuff, like
Dead
being
Space.
Trapped on a derelict ship in space
game.
And there are creatures on it. That'd be super dope too.
Yeah.
Have you cool. So you played Goliath Bard in the last game, if I'm correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Have you thought about what character you might want to play next time? Is there like a certain race or a certain class that you may have now ran across that you're like, man, I think that'd be fun to play next time? Or just from listening to, you know, some of the other characters that were in the campaign with you, if you're into like a barbarian, a wizard, a sorcerer, anything, a ranger?
Probably definitely, because I always go for it in like role-playing games on console and on PC, but most likely a sorcerer or a wizard. But I'll play any race as long as it's not racist. Sorry.
Well,
I couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
No, that's actually becoming a huge thing in D&D.
Yeah.
It's like, because right now, if you were to pull up D&D Beyond, for example, or whatever, or any source book that's out there currently, and you look up race, they all have racial traits. And some the racial traits give you boons, but some of them also give you negatives to certain things. So that's becoming a huge source of topic right now in D&D. Is it's racist to have these races have a natural disadvantage in a situation just based off of their race, and there's groups out there working on getting rid of that. We've talked about it in the podcast before. I think it's flavor and it makes it more fun and interesting, but to each their own.
Yeah.
It makes it more realistic in a way, even though, of course, it's fantasy, it's role-playing. In life, we deal with these similar struggles, and unfortunately, they are struggles that exist in the world. I think it's great. I think it makes it more relatable almost in a sense, which is unfortunate at the same time. It's like a double-edged sword in a way. Like I always like to play as an Argonian in like Elder Scrolls because of their ability to breathe underwater, and it's just something that their quote-unquote race has the ability to have. I think it all adds to the play value and replay value of certain things. If every race or character has the same exact abilities, then there's no point in picking a different one.
Mm-hmm. You kind of hit on all the things that we talked about on that same podcast, where we were saying a lot of the same things of like, it's flavor, it's indicative of our actual world. So like if you're playing a more serious game where you're trying to get them to realize, like if you're playing a half orc and you go into a town and people hate you, it's like that's something that people really deal with in real life, and if you're trying to demonstrate the weight of a world, like that shit happens. Like just because you don't have to deal with it on a daily basis and then you start dealing with it in a game, like that shouldn't make you hate the game of it. It should make you realize, like, look, I don't have to deal with this on a daily basis, but some people do, and like, holy shit, this is how it is. I don't think it should be a moment for you to realize, like, hey, look, like, I have it really good, but if it does, I mean, it does.
And
but
for the people that do deal with that, like I said, it makes it relatable. Yes, we're getting into fantasy, but even though we're getting into a fantasy world, you need something that's relatable to the person to pull them into the story. If it's totally separated from their life, they can't relate to the character and actually kind of get into it in the way that if you relate to the story or relate to the character, you feel for that character, you want them to succeed in a way where you don't have when they're completely disconnected from it. Yeah. So having that racial differences kind of helps make things relatable and real. When you were talking, Bruce, about the half-orc walking into town, and, that town is against orcs because, their land is plagued by orc raids and stuff like that. Something I think of is, I don't know, Cameron, if you've seen it, there's a show right now out called Lovecraft Country. It's super good. So, do you know who H.P. Lovecraft is?
Yes, Cthulhu.
Yes, he wrote Cthulhu and many other creepy, weird stories. But there is right now a show that is based off of H.P. Lovecraft's stories, and the stories are actually in the show, but the idea is that he wrote them off of a real place. So it starts off, this show is based in the 50s, so it's very racist. And it's about this African-American family who the dad goes missing, the son and the uncle, and one of the son's friends kind of go looking for him because they heard he's, at this really weird place. There's a whole mystery surrounding this area and where the dad is, so they go find him. The uncle actually writes travel novels for the African-American, like places, like it's like a travel book, but it's like places you can go safely, where can you go eat that they will
It's like a traveler's guide.
Yeah. Where can you
Kinda
eat
like
where
the
you're,
Green Book.
You're not going to be shunned for being black? Where can you stay? Like, where can you walk into a hotel and be welcomed rather than like them throw you out because you're black? Stuff like that. So he kind of takes it as like, cool, it's a road trip for me where I can get more content for my book. But then they go to this place and they end up in the place where H.P. Lovecraft was when he wrote all these stories. So there's always crazy creatures and monsters, and and there's magic, and it's a weird, amazing show. But like one of the things that why I brought this up is when they were headed there, they stopped in this town, and what used to be a diner in his book where you can go eat as a colored person, they go and sit down. It's new ownership, and like they're chased out of town literally at gunpoint as people are shooting at them. And then they finally get to this other town, and it's what they call a sundown county, where like if you're black, you cannot be outside after dark, otherwise like you'll be thrown in jail. And obviously they have nowhere to stay there, and they're in the middle of this county, and they're like, hey, this cop kind of like pulls him over, and like, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're just here, looking around. Well, this is a sundown county. You have 20 minutes to get out of my county, otherwise you're arrested. And they're like, we're 25 minutes from the border. So he like literally follows him out of town, just watching his watch. Like, if they don't get across that railroad track by the time,
But if they speed...
Yeah, but then that was the other thing. But if they speed, then he can pull them over and detain them, and then they wouldn't make it out in time. So it was literally like this like fight and this totally tense moment where like, okay, the cop's following us, we can't speed, but we gotta go fast, so we gotta make it over the border in time. And it was just like, you don't, even though it's a fantasy story and a lot of crazy creatures and monsters and magic and stuff, they brought in this racial tension to ground it and make it real. And just adds so much texture to the story. So
yeah, and then I think like when you come to like abilities and stuff, like racial abilities, like they literally wrote these characters in as these races in as these races and their backstories and like their origins. So a lot of those racial traits make a lot of sense. Like if you have a half-orc, he's going to be naturally stronger than a halfling, because a halfling is like 2 or 3 feet tall. Like, how are they going to out arm wrestle a half-orc, Like, they're just naturally built bigger and stronger. But I think what they're doing now, if I understand correctly, what they're doing is they're trying to put it into your background. Like, having background be what gives you those little abilities and stuff. Instead of them being racial abilities, they're like background abilities or picked up traits or learned traits or whatever it is. So you can be a halfling and be a barbarian, or you can be a Goliath and be a rogue, like be naturally sneaky and stuff because of your background, which does make a lot of sense because, in the real world, it's like nature and nurture. Like, yes, nature does play a part into it, but your nurturing teaches you what you know as you go along. And so what they're trying to do to fix it isn't so bad of a fix, but it's definitely different from the natural or the original kind of like game plan of what was written down, which is still fine as long as it creates some kind of diversity in the game where you're still getting certain benefits for doing certain things. Like, I don't mind it.
Yeah, and I mean, the kind of one of the great things about D&D is, as a DM, you have kind of control over the realm. So if you're DMing a party that is more towards the side of liking the fact that these, their characters don't have these racial abilities, then cool, that's how you DM your game. If you step over into another group that they enjoy the racial abilities, cool, DM your game like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it does give you the flexibility to kind of do what you want, which is nice.
Yeah. But anyways, I think we got really far away from what we were asking.
Yeah, the continuity conductor let that go way off track.
Yeah. Yeah.
My bad.
We stopped at Sidetrack Station real quick. So I think what the original question was that led us into this was, is there any like specific races or other classes that you'd like to play? I think you said something about sorcerer or wizard, but I don't remember exactly.
Yes, you are correct. I did say, because that's typically what I choose to play in most like role-playing games. Typically sorcerers, wizards, rangers, long range. I typically go for DPS from the distance.
Okay. Got it.
Not a full-on tank DPS, but just a ranged DPS.
Yep.
So for ranged DPS, you might actually like rogue, and if you like spells, you might like trickster rogue, because trickster rogues use a little bit of magic as well as because I'm thinking for sneak attack, if you're trying to do, which in D&D would actually be DPR, which is damage per round, rather than damage per second or damage per whatever.
Yes, damage per second.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. So it'd be DPR. With a rogue, you can get a lot of DPR as long as you're hiding. So, like, if you're, keeping your distance and you're up in the boughs of a tree and you fire off a longbow and you hit your target, well, you also get sneak attack damage. You can add a couple D6 onto that hit and then go from there. But with a trickster rogue, you get like different spells too.
I think sorcerers are also really good for for DPS or DPR. Just
Limited spells.
limited spells, and
Spell slots, I should say.
Yeah, limited spell slots. But it's just all dependent on what you like. So was there like a race that you thought would be fun to play, Cameron?
Like I said, I wouldn't mind trying all of them out at least once. At least once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel it out, kind of, in a way.
So, do you have something you wanted to hit?
Oh, I said, well, see if you guys want to get into a question.
Sure.
All right.
So, what we're going to do now is read a question from a listener or a question from a...
this is from a forum.
Yes.
I went forum trolling today. So, this one is from the D&D Beyond forum. This is from, it looks like it says ASIN.
ASIN.
AASIN.
It's AASIN.
AASIN. Like Aaron?
Yeah. Yeah, like Aaron.
You done fucked up, Aaron.
Yeah.
You done fucked up, AASIN. All right.
Yeah.
AASIN sounds like he's a new player. He says, I was wondering how you guys... Oh, I'm sorry. Nope. This is not the new player. Scratch that. That's a different question.
Okay.
But this is AASIN. So he said, I'm wondering how you guys saw leadership during your games and if it positively improved your campaigns. I'm a DM and I lack leadership from the players is a common problem I see. So, Bruce,
so no one's taking the wheel in the group.
Yeah.
They're all just kind of reacting.
Yes. So my first thought is that is something like from what I was saying earlier, where your players are not getting into the character as much. I think when you're not, what was the words I used earlier?
I don't know.
I don't know either. But
I always stop listening to you as soon as you start talking. What?
Yeah, exactly. You asshole. If they are really invested into the character and get into that role-playing mode, then I think they will start to take on naturally a maybe not so much a leadership role, but they'll start actually having goals they want to accomplish, and they'll start making moves to accomplish that. Whereas players who are not as invested kind of just go into reactory mode, where it's just like the DM says something, okay, I'm going to react to it, but I'm not taking my own steps to make something happen.
Yeah, I think that you also have to deal with that when you're playing with new players, where they're not exactly sure of the world or like sure of what they can or what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the times when I run into these issues where like someone's not making a decision on what they do next, I will have I'll have them roll. So I'll have them roll something like, okay, you guys have been standing here for a while or whatever. This is what I'm thinking in my head. So you guys have been standing around this area for a while, or like you've been doing this one thing for a while. So I just say, okay, everyone go ahead and roll a perception check. And then whoever rolls the highest, I give them this little bit of information, or depending on how well they roll, I'll give them whatever information is accurate for that roll. And then I say, what do you want to do with that? And then I leave it at that. And I have them kind of like, okay, well, I heard, like, I did this to Cameron in our game, where during your watch, you rolled really high on your watch. And so, like, you're high on your perception roll for your night watch. And so what I did was I described to you what you heard. And then once you heard that, you kind of had, like, this pause of hesitation of, like, what do I do with this information? So I literally asked you, what do you want to do with this information? So, like, what are you going to do next? Are you going to tell your party? Are you going to keep this to yourself? Are you going to go investigate? Like, I gave you a couple options of what to do, and then you made your decision, and you told the party, and then from there, it kicked it off into the next little couple steps. And so, that's something I feel is really useful. If you don't have someone who's taking the lead, pick a leader by having them roll. So, you have your kids or your people playing in they start in the tavern or whatever the hell they're doing, and they've been in there farting around trying to start a new rock band or whatever, and you have them, when they're up there playing, you have them roll a perception check while they're playing, and you let them play out whatever they're going to play out. but that perception check while they're playing gives them a little something. So now they, the lead singer's up there singing, and you give them advantage on the roll because they're up on a stage. They roll really well, and they say, okay, you notice a guy at the back of the bar wearing a heavy cloak and has the hood up inside, which is strange. Catches your eye as he walks into the back room, and you see the glint of a blade, even though weapons are supposed to be laid at the door. What are you going to do with that information? And then you just leave it at that.
I just want to give context to this to Cameron and to the listeners. Bruce didn't just come up with that off of the top of his head, that whole situation he just laid out. That happened in one of our campaigns. The one that I play in, we had a rogue who decided he wanted to multi-class as a bard. And we said, well, that doesn't just happen.
But we told him,
you have to practice to make that
justify it in the story. Yeah.
If you want to, you can't just be like, oh, I leveled up. Hey, I'm a bard now. Like, role play it out to become a bard.
Yeah.
So
how did you become a bard? So he's like, oh, well, I heard someone playing and I wanted to do that. Like, I wanted to be able to play songs and stuff. Okay, well, where'd you get your instrument? He's like, I don't have an instrument. He's like, okay, well, now you have to get an instrument. So it's like we made him go through the steps to justify the real world consequences, or like real world causation of becoming a bard. Well, okay, well, now you have to become a bard, so go do it.
So he went and bought an instrument, and then he wanted to start playing at bars every time we went to a tavern at night. And so, me being me, I'm like, hey, like, he plays a halfling, and in the campaign I play a Goliath, and I'm like, I want this Goliath up on stage with this this halfling. So I'm like, hey Bruce, where's the closest music store? So I go and I buy an instrument. And then one of the other party members is like, yeah, I want to do this too. The whole party ended up going and buying instruments just so we can get on stage and perform with our rogue who wanted to be a bard.
For like 5 games. Every time we were like, okay, it's coming to the end of the night. Where are you guys going to set up camp? Like, camp. We're going to go to a tavern and we're going to play and we're going to earn our rooms or whatever the hell it was. And it's just like, guys, you just extended this game by like 2 hours because now I have to describe a battle of the bands that you guys end up getting into because you guys are so competitive about how good you are, and you're not really that good yet. You just started, so. But yeah, and at one point we actually did a battle of the bands of like,
we did.
There's a special tavern over here, and they have like basically an open mic night where they have different bands come up, and it was in the major capital of our world. And it was like, if you play best, you get, free drinks and you get tips from the crowd, and whoever does the best, gets to come back and do it again, and basically gets guaranteed coin for that next week. And so they were like, well, we're strapped for cash right now, so let's do it. And they were throwing all kinds of fuckery in there, like using a spell called Mage Hand, which is basically like telekinesis to fuck with the other person's instruments and fuck up their performance checks to make sure that they did well, but the other band did the same thing back to them. And so it was just like, but we had to come up with that on the fly because they just randomly were like, that bar, they just point across the road, like, that bar there, that tavern is our new fucking jam session, let's go. And it's like, fuck. So
that sounds, not gonna lie, that sounds amazing, and I am disappointed that I missed out on that.
Don't you fucking start.
Because that sounds like some shenanigans that I would start too. Just like, you know what, I'm in. Let's all get instruments. You guys are all enablers. You're just all enablers, is what it is.
So, Cameron, that's the kind of tomfoolery you can get into in D&D. You just, whatever you can think of, you can make it happen.
Yeah, but I think to get back to this question real quick is, if you don't have people leading, give them situation like, if someone asks for strength, don't give them strength, give them an opportunity to be strong. So if you don't have leaders, don't force someone to be, like, don't ask someone to be a leader, give someone a chance to lead. So give them those roles, give them those opportunities to get that information that maybe someone else doesn't have, and then ask them what they want to do with it.
Okay, I want to hear from Cameron here. Cameron.
Okay.
what are your thoughts on this question? I know you don't have a huge D&D basis, but just real world, any situation you're in where no one wants to step up and be the leader, how do you go about that situation and get a leader out of a group?
Well, me being the person that I am, typically I just will take the lead. If I'm not seeing that somebody's taking lead and that some action needs to be taken, I'll jump in 90% of the time.
But as the DM, a lot of times you're wanting the party to lead, so...
Right. So as a DM, what would I do? I mean, I guess similar to the way that it was done my first time playing, just kind of little subtle pushes in a way. Not pushes, though, that sounds too aggressive. Little hints, like you know, hey, this is something you could potentially do, or this is something else you could potentially do. Like, not exactly giving the 100% of the information, but like just subtle little gestures in a way.
And then at some point, I think doing that, you kind of Pavlov's dog them, where like enough times you do that and you start to nudge them towards a leadership role, eventually they're going to figure it out. Like, hey, I can do this and I can do this and I can do this. And once they start to catch on, then you don't have to nudge them anymore. And it becomes
natural.
Natural, exactly.
Yeah, just that unconscious response, yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, that's the way I do it, so of course I think that's the best way to do it, because that's the solution I've come up with for that exact problem, so...
Well, like me, for instance, I was nervous as heck. I had no idea how to do this. I was, like, still a little bit rigid, I was a little bit out of my comfort zone in a way, even with what I do with TikToks, with going live, streaming, and all that. Still, just like 3 people together, 4 people actually, because Kayla was there, right?
She was.
And, it was just a little bit different for me. So first time jitters, I think, is what I was having an issue with. But now that I know pretty much no holds, you can just do whatever.
Yeah, the world is your oyster, yeah.
I'm going to make things hard for you a little bit sometimes, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. You should see my party on a regular basis. Like,
whose ship is it?
Shit. So is there another question you got that you really want to answer?
I have
Let's
another
do the
question.
first time.
I have another question.
Let's do the newbie question.
Okay. I was going to see if you wanted to kind of do your segment, then we can come back to questions. I know you had a segment you were burning to do too.
Yeah.
Well, let's do the newbie question because we have Cameron on, and then if we have time to do mine, we'll do mine too. Because mine's more of a concept creation thing that you guys can jump in on.
Okay. Newbie question. This is from Sniper Diaper 23.
Dope name.
It is. Amazing name.
He can nail a diaper with a turd from 80 yards away.
So, he said, Hi, new to D&D, and this is probably a pretty basic question, but not 100% on it. I'm playing as a half-elf warlock, and my bonus action is 2-weapon fighting. Just wondering if there's any way for me to cast a spell and also get a physical attack in as well, or is this bonus action just something I won't be able to use frequently as I focus on spell casting? Any information would be appreciated. I know how...
So that was a first-time player question, but with a little bit more... Like, they have a little bit more understanding.
Yeah. So I can tell you how we play this in our games. As we consider it, 2-weapon fighting implies that there is a melee attack before. You're not casting and then, slashing.
Striking. Yeah.
Striking. It's a strike with one weapon, and then since you have a second weapon, you have the opportunity to strike with that second weapon. We've also modified it a little bit for us. A lot of times we'll do it where it's not 2 weapons, but just saying that 2-weapon fighting gives you the proficiency enough with a weapon to strike twice with it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, like my character I play uses a halberd, and that's a 2-handed weapon. So the way I use 2-weapon fighting a lot of times is we say that he's proficient enough with his halberd that he can strike twice in that 6 seconds. So it's kind of how your DM's going to play it, but the way we've always played it is the the bonus action 2-weapon fighting attack has to follow another melee attack. Because if you're casting first, that casting time is going to take up the time it would take to do a second attack.
Yeah. Like, you're more focused on that, like, it's a spell. You're basically controlling something that's you have to be highly focused on for it to fire right. So you're not focused on, well, I'm going to cast a fireball here and then punch this dude that's right next to me. That's not, like, you're focusing on that spell. So are you really cognitively there enough to do this other strike? So we play it as it's either a physical strike followed by a physical strike, or it's a spell followed by either a cantrip, which is a very low level spell that doesn't require a spell slot. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you, Cameron. I don't think you've played a spellcaster yet, but it's basically like your basic level spell. Sometimes we'll allow that depending on what it is. As long as it makes sense and you can back it up with something your character has in its repertoire. Anyways, as long as it's conceivable and you can explain it in a way that makes it seem like it's something fluid that can happen, most of the time we'll let it happen. But a lot of the times what we do is we give it very grounded rules of, like, you know, if you're striking someone, you can strike them again. Yes, that works, as long as you have 2-weapon fighting. If you're casting, we're only going to let you cast according to that spell. So it like you said, it depends on your DM and how close to the rules they're playing.
And also something we do too is because we call it basically your offhand attack, you're not using your dominant hand, or it's not your primary strike, because if you're using a 2-handed weapon, you've put your strength into that first strike, and now to follow through with your second, it's not going to be as strong. So we ground it a little bit and we take away your bonuses. So I believe, did we keep the bonus to hit and we take away the bonus to the dice, or how did we play that?
Yeah, so like if you're using a short sword or whatever and you're swinging it and you're doing 1d6 plus 2, on the second strike you'll just do the 1d6 straight. You won't add the plus 2.
Yeah.
So your 2 hit stays the same because that's your ability to hit. That's your ability to aim or target, whatever it is. That's your technical ability. But your strength put into it, or like the extra damage put in by your you know,
dominant
your
hand.
Your natural strength. Like you use that on your first hit. So this one's just a bonus kind of hit. So you're only doing
a base level of damage.
The base level of damage. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
I think that perfectly is understandable, especially with like you said, with spell casting and the fact that it's going to take concentration, focus, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't make any sense at all, then it shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, like you can't do a hit, you can't do a hit and then cast like a fireball spell. Like, first of all, you used your action normally. So with spell casting, there's a required time to cast, and in your turn you have your movement, your action, your bonus action, and then you have free action to speak and stuff. So if your spell costs an action, that's the main part of your turn, right? So if you're gonna also try and hit or cast another spell, as long as it's a bonus action spell, like it literally says the casting time is 1 bonus action, then you can most likely cast that, depending on the level and all that other stuff. But if you're wanting to do a spell and then try and hit, it doesn't quite fit because you haven't made that contact. Like you said, that concentration is focused on something else. So justifying that, that lash out of trying to do a strike doesn't quite fit that scenario. But like we said, it's mostly on the DMs. I think the official rules say that, casting is one thing and striking is another. So I don't think the rules actually allow you to do that as well. I haven't read up on that specific one because we have weird house rules for ours.
No, I believe the actual rules of 2-weapon fighting is it has to be preceded by a melee attack to get the second melee attack. But like I said, we kind of twist it a little bit and allow a caster another spell if it's a bonus action to cast. Just because of the way time would break down. So that's kind of how we break it down. But it's up to the DM. It's their world. They can play it how they want. Bruce, take me into your world, man. I wanna dive deep into what you got in your noggin, and we have Cameron here, and I want to get his imaginative gears turning in his brain so he can give us some thoughts on what you got going on in your head.
Okay, so imagine like one of those classic movie openers where you see like in a warm lit room by a fireplace off in the corner, leather-bound books on all the shelves, and you see someone sitting in a beautiful high-backed leather chair, and they're wearing like a smoking jacket, their legs are crossed, wearing little house slippers and stuff with a book in their lap, and you hear like that tinny kind of piano playing as it like zooms into them, and they're like, "Oh, hey, I didn't see you there." And then they close their books, set their glasses down on the table, take a sip of their whiskey or cognac or whatever it is, and set it back down, and then they start talking. That's what we're doing as we come into this corner, okay? Like, okay, it's me though. I'm in the chair. Oh, hi. Welcome to Bruce's book corner. Come on over here. Let me tell you about a good book. So, I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately. I drive for a living, so I have a lot of time behind the wheel where listening to the same 6 songs play on the radio is emotionally and physically draining. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and lately I've been on this swing of the author Scott Sigler, and he writes a lot of kind of like science fiction, mystery, horror, kind of short stories and novels and stuff. And I just listened to the first book in his trilogy. It's called the Generations trilogy, and the first book is called Alive, and it is really good, and I think it would make a really fun like one-shot campaign or the beginning to a campaign, and then you can kind of, after this kind of structured part, let your party digest the world as they will. But I wanted to kind of read a short synopsis of it and have you guys kind of play with that idea in your head, and maybe I can give a little bit more description or explanation to what I listened to in the book itself. But here we go. A teenage girl awakens to find herself trapped in a coffin. She has no idea who she is, where she is, or how she's got there. Fighting her way free brings little relief. She discovers only a room lined with caskets and a handful of equally mystified survivors. Beyond their room lies a corridor filled with bones and dust, but no people and no answers. She knows only one thing about herself. Her name is M. Savage, which was engraved at the foot of her coffin. Yet she finds herself in charge. She's not the biggest among them, or the boldest, but for some reason the others trust her. Now, to have any chance, she must get them to trust one another. Whatever the truth is, she is determined to find it and confront it. If she has to lead, she will make sure they survive. Maybe there's a way out, a rational explanation, and a fighting chance against the dangers to come. Or maybe a reality they cannot comprehend lies just behind the next door. So this book is wild. It goes up and down, and it goes through like a bunch of different emotions and stuff, and I really enjoy it. If you are intrigued after you listen to this podcast or what we do to it after this, you can go to Scott Sigler's website and find it for free. It's kind of like a serialized podcast where they read a couple chapters and then they cut it off and you can listen to the next episode. So the reason I think it'd be a really good way to start out a campaign is they literally start with nothing. Just the clothes they have on and no memories. So literally going into the campaign as a level 1 character and someone who's never played D&D or someone who's just starting this campaign, the people playing their characters in this campaign know as much as the people coming out of the coffins. And so the whole journey is to try and figure out what the hell is going on. And as they go through, you can introduce NPCs to them. Like in the story, they're traveling down this corridor for a long time, and they end up running across this second group of survivors. And when they do, there's kind of like a confrontation that comes up there, and I can see that being a really interesting point of contact where their interactions with this other group can change the basic layout of this campaign. And as they encounter the second group, they end up building an alliance and traveling together. And as they do that, they start to find out more information about where they are and kind of their surroundings. And like basically this place is a maze of corridors and hallways and rooms. And they can investigate the rooms and find, you know, different items and stuff like that. And you can slowly have them build up their inventory. And as they go through and learn more information, they can start trying to find certain places and seek out these truths of what they don't know. Another interesting thing that happens is they end up starving because there's no food around. I mean, the bodies laying in the corridors are reduced to dust and stretched flesh across bones. So to say if food survived on this ship, if the bodies are in such a bad condition, would be a miracle. And so they end up, you know, damn near starving and coming across one of the biggest oppositions they come to is they find a wild pig running through one of the corridors and breaking into caskets and stuff. And so, excited and hungry, they attack this pig, but they don't end up killing it outright, and they have to chase it down. And it ends up leading them to, like, this oasis. And in this oasis, they end up killing this pig, and then a memory pops back into the main character's head, and they realize that pigs are crazy. They will eat literally anything. And they had left someone behind and unprotected, and now they have to run back and try and save them or figure out what happens. And so there's a lot of little things you can do, different encounters and stuff that you can have on a table, like just build a little encounter table and then have them roll to see one of the 6 options of something that can happen, and then they're kind of in control of that. But basically the setting is a enclosed space where they can go basically in any direction, but it's up to them to decide. And then as they go along, you can be feeding them some information, having them encounter different random things. But by the end, the goal is to try and figure out what the hell happened and how to get out. Now, my question and my request to you guys is there encounters or situations you can see coming up in that would be kind of interesting to throw at them or fun to play if you were a player?
I'm going to let Cameron jump on this first. I have a couple ideas, but I want to hear from Cameron.
Well, I think it would be definitely a good idea to, in a sense, exactly what you said, that they have to kind of explore this, in a way, dungeon of sorts to find...
That is a word
things.
that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Is like, they're trapped in a dungeon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to use that exact term, but that was, of course, the first one that comes to mind, is they're trapped in this kind of, like, institution almost, like you said, like a derelict location where it's not exactly completely devoid of life, but it seems almost. And I like the idea of searching through different corridors, different rooms, finding different locations with potentially useful items or useful gear that they have to use to get to different places, like puzzly, kind of like an escape room. Yeah, and in a way, like the immediate thing that I thought of was escape rooms. I love escape rooms, though. They're fun.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking. Like, this could be a really puzzle-heavy kind of game up until it comes to the combat parts. And as far as the combat parts, if you listen to that audiobook, which I don't want to spoil too much in case you guys do, because it's a really good book, I've been fighting to try and find the second book in audiobook format, but everything I find, you have to pay like $28 to listen to the audiobook, and it's not even like a good reading. It's a highly dramatized version, and so it's like really hard to listen to because they're like, she wakes up in the coffin and she's screaming, and they actually put a lady yelling and screaming behind the guy trying to talk, and it's like, I can't listen to this because I can't understand what the fuck he's saying. But that's my struggle. That's not your guys' problem. So I like I said, I saw this as being like a puzzle heavy, kind of like whodunit, information gathering, thing where they're kind of fighting against time, because I could see the mechanics going, once you're out of the coffin, you have so many hours doing so many stuff before you start taking exhaustion. Which in D&D, with each level exhaustion you take, your abilities and your roles are affected by that. So the first level of exhaustion, all your ability checks and some of the other stuff you can do are all at disadvantage because you're exhausted. You haven't had food, so you're hungry, you're weak. You haven't had water, so, you're not able to go as far or as fast as you can. And so every hour after that, if they're not finding food or they're not finding a way to get them closer to food, then they're suffering those things, and it's like a challenge even more than what they already have in front of them, which is like they have no idea what's going on. And I can see you like starting the campaign of okay, choose your name, and then choose a class, and then maybe I think as a team, I don't know, maybe Trevor can kind of help with this, or Cameron, if you have any ideas of should there be a race restriction where it's like, okay, you guys can choose from any of these 4 races of what you are, but these are the only 4 races, like you can't pick this, or this. Does that sound like something that would be a good idea, or would it be harder to limit them like that?
I don't think there's a need to limit them like that. As far as race is concerned, I mean, there's no, like I said, depending on the world you're setting up, you can decide how much sense it would make to have all these different type of creatures in this area, or gather all these different type of races gathered. If it's a very mixed world, then it would make sense to have several different races put into these coffins, or you can even make it like a collector scenario, right? Where, hey, so you can almost even make it fun to where you'd be like, all right, you 6, you call out a race, but once you call out that race, no one else can be the same race.
Oh, okay.
And so then it can kind of play into the story at some point that, the more they find out, they're not thinking about the fact that they're all different races, but maybe the reason that they were all gathered into these coffins is it's a collector scenario. He wanted, one from every race or something.
So I will also say that in this story, all of these characters have a strange black jewel circle on their forehead that has some kind of symbol in the middle of it. And they don't know what it means because they don't have their memory of that. Yeah. So some of them are just a circle with a smooth circle inside of it. Some of them are a circle with teeth on it, is what they say. But it's basically supposed to be like a gear. That's kind of how it's described. And then there's others that have a star. And there's others that have a half circle. And they all mean something, and they know that. They know that there's some kind of hierarchy to it, or there's some kind of denotation to them. But they don't know what it is. So I'm thinking you guys, you talk to your party beforehand and you say, okay, each person pick 3 classes that you would really like to play, or pick 2 classes that you would really like to play. And then, because another thing is they don't know what they're there for, what their abilities are, what they can do. And so what ends up happening is as they come up to situations, some people are just naturally adept at figuring out what's going to happen next. There's a certain scenario where they find this object and no one knows what it is. It's covered in these jewels, and as they interact with these jewels, different things happen. But when they first see it, they're afraid to do anything with it. And then one of the people who's rescued from the coffins kind of starts figuring it out, and it's just oh, I know what to do. Like, I don't know why, or I don't know how, but I know what to do here. And so like, you slowly start to see their classes revealed. And I think that would be kind of fun. Is like, you have your party each pick 2 classes that they'd really like to play, and then you pick one for them. And then as those situations come up where it's like, okay, you find this section of the wall that has all these different colored jewels on it, and it looks like they might be able to interact with them. So you have each of them roll this roll, but whoever is basically of that class gets a benefit to it, so they naturally roll higher, and they're like, oh, okay. Or you just basically tell them, like, Trevor, roll in, a skill check, or, roll a check and add whatever to it. And then as you guys start to go through this basically like maze or this escape room, and you start doing these rolls, you basically start revealing more and more of their character sheet to them. Yeah. Whether it's skills and abilities or attributes and stuff like that.
So that was the first thing I thought of when you started saying that these jewels had symbols in them. My mind went to like the Divergent series.
Yeah. So this book is described as Hunger Games meets Divergent meets Red Rising, which I don't know what Red Rising is, but I guess it's another really cool book.
And also meets Lord of the Flies, because that was the whole thing I was thinking of the whole time you were describing the first beginning is, wow, this is very heavily Lord of the Flies. But I'm a literary nerd like that, so...
That's another book that they bring up when describing it, so you're exactly right on.
Yeah.
It's a really good book. I think you would like it.
So yeah, that's what I was thinking was Divergent. Like this is, the society is divided into classes, and that jewel in your head is shows everyone what your class is. The other thing I was thinking of was like that the symbols could also be like social class, so they don't know it, but like maybe the half moon is like the beggars of society, and then the gear is the laborers, and the sun or whatever is like royalty level people, and there's different things you could do with that to throw at their character's way.
Yeah, there's definitely that stuff in the book as well. Like they slowly start to realize that so they call the ones with a star in it circle stars. They're like, wow, these circle stars are really good at these specific tasks. Like the people in this book are called the birthday children. And the reason is because as you open the book, or as you start listening to the book, it's the inner monologue of M. Savage, who is in her head talking about how I don't want to wake up. I don't want to get up for school or do all this stuff. It's my birthday today. I'm turning 12 today. Like, I don't want to have to wake up and go do this stuff, but I guess I need to wake up. And she's like, it is my birthday after all, so it's not going to be an awful day. And as she, wakes up inside this coffin, she's like, what the absolute fuck is going on? And she's instantly terrified. So when she breaks out of the coffin, and then, the next character is introduced, she realizes that, even though she's a little 12-year-old girl, that, this other person is like an adult, and why would they, be doing this stuff and the other? Like, she sees this next person as being like 20 or 22 and doesn't know why they're acting the way they're acting. And then this person responds to them like, well, you're 20 or 22, so I don't know why you're acting like this. And then she realizes like, oh fuck, I'm not 12. And she looks down at her body and is like trying to like take it all in, because she didn't even think about that, because you're inside your own head, so you're not really thinking like, well, I'm 12 today, so you're not thinking, well, there's no way I could be not 12. So what ends up happening is they realize that there's some kind of time dilation thing that happened, and they're much different than what they realize. And I don't remember where I was going with this, but yeah, it's a really good book. I think you guys will both enjoy it.
But I think it sounds like it'd be a good D&D campaign.
Yeah, I think I like, instead of the common trope of you meet in a tavern, like you wake up in a coffin, like it's definitely a twist to the beginning of a D&D game.
Yeah,
and yeah, I think it'd be intriguing to try and kind of crawl your way through the glass to try and figure out what the fuck is going on, and overcoming these hardships as you go.
So
what do you think? One last question?
I have another question, but I want to see if we've sparked anything in Cameron's mind that he might want to talk about.
Well, kind of like, I definitely like the sound of that. It sounds exactly how you had described it when I had first heard of it, that it's like, kind of like escape room meets a puzzle kind of adventure, but also there's that good level of mystery there. So I definitely like that idea as a campaign. It even, to me, has subtle notes of like Dead Space in a way, of like a derelict thing, entity, not necessarily a dungeon.
Yeah.
So I definitely do think that sounds right around somewhere where I'd like to hang out. Like, just, you got to figure it out. Like, it's not really straightforward, but I definitely do appreciate that thought as a D&D campaign. That would be neat.
So I have a question for you, Cameron. Is there anything about D&D or playing a specific class or doing any specific actions that you have questions about? I know that we do take questions from forums and listeners and stuff, but since we have you here and you're still reasonably or justifiably new, is there anything that you'd like a little bit of clarification on?
I think after the first game, I pretty much understood a majority of it, thanks to, like I said, a lot of the memes that I've seen, and the fact that I do have a lot of friends that I also follow that play a lot of D&D and have explained some things to me. It's not as difficult as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I thought it would be a lot more, but you literally can do just about anything, as long as, like you said, the parameters are met by your character and there's no restrictions specifically. Just have fun with it, really. Just be imaginative, creative.
Is there anything that you wish you would have known going into playing, or anything that you would tell new players coming in that would kind of help reassure them or like explain something to them, like right off the bat? Like, is there any information or advice you'd give someone who's just coming in, who is nervous like you were coming in?
I guess just don't be afraid to think outside of the box. Don't box yourself in so much. Just have fun with it. Go with the flow, in a way.
I like that.
Excellent.
The way that I live my life, I should have played D&D.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why jump into the fantasy world and then put yourself in a box?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I want to get away from my regular life. I want to go and highly restrict myself to doing specific things and being afraid to do stuff. Yeah. Well, it is an escape from reality, so that does make sense.
All right. You ready for one last quick question, Bruce?
Yeah. Hopefully it's quick, because I think we're pushing a little deep right now.
It is very quick.
Okay. Just like me.
Oh. So, Barbarian Bro asks, why do dragons have different stat blocks for their ages? Like, we don't have stat blocks for like a young orc or an adult orc, but we have young dragon, adult dragon, and ancient dragon. So, like, why?
That's definitely a barbarian question, because their intelligence isn't very high. So,
don't insult the poor
that's a
guy.
little D&G. Well, you can't fix stupid. No, okay. I'm joking.
So my answer, Bruce, and you can tell me what you think, is one is dragons have such a long lifespan that, like, an orc or any other race doesn't have the ability to grow and mature and learn as much to where they become like a whole new level. Like, you level up your character, but to become a whole new stat block of levels, most creatures don't live long enough to achieve that, right? I kind of would compare it to in games, Cameron might even get a little click in his head right here, prestiging, right? So you play all the way through, you max out at level 99, and then you prestige and you go back to level 1. I see that as kind of how it goes for young adult and ancient dragons. Is they went, a young dragon it's a long lifespan just as a young dragon. So they go through, they prestige, they get a new stat block, but they're back at level 1, and then they have to work. Then they kind of have this long life where they're basically working their way through. They prestige again.
So you're describing it as like milestones. So like they go so long until they get to this milestone, and now it's a new journey to the next milestone.
Yeah. But it's
Okay.
not so much a milestone. I think it's just a natural evolution of their life. But they're on the world so long that they can achieve these milestones and become, a bigger, more aggressive, more badass thing that other creatures don't have the opportunity to become.
Yeah, I guess how I should have described it is the way I picture the way you're describing it is almost like a triathlon. So the first section is running. Okay, well, they've done the running. They've gotten all the way to the end of the running. Well, now they're starting biking. Okay, well, now they start at the beginning section of the biking until they get to the end, and now they're going to swimming. Okay, now they're, like you're starting from the beginning, but you're further down the road.
Yeah, I guess kind of, yes.
So the easy way to answer this is, as a character, you don't have a young orc, middle-aged orc, and then like an elder orc, but you do have levels. So you start out level 1, you work your way through, you do your you grind, you get through the first 5 levels, and now you're basically a new kind of creature because you have all these new different abilities. Well, it's the same thing for these dragons, but for a DM, it's a lot simpler to put it in 3 stages rather than, going through and leveling this monster one by one. So it's literally just levels of intensity. So a young dragon is still young enough to where they're in their first 1 to 5 levels. And then you go to a young adult dragon, which is, your 5 to 15. It's still a lot bigger chunk, but they're basically leveling up. And then you have an adult dragon that's like,
Ancient dragon, you mean?
yeah. Well, I think that it's young dragon, adult dragon, and ancient dragon, right?
Yes, yeah, young, adult,
something
ancient.
to the effect. Yeah. So it's basically just leveling of a monster. It's just the translation from a player to a creature. And that's all it really is.
I had seen someone answer this, and they had also another really good point, was that it's kind of a 2-part thing where one, like a child of pretty much any other race is really not a combatant.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't consider that a part of the D&D combatant playable characters.
Like a phase, yeah.
Yeah, until they're an adult. Then they're old enough, big enough, strong enough to be a hero. Because, like I said, we've said this before, you got to remember that your characters you're playing are heroes. They're not your average person, not your average kid. It's like at a level, what did we say, a level like 4, you're already like Olympic athlete level.
Yeah.
So you're like
level
amazing.
1, you're probably near like a semi-pro athlete of, like you're able to do a lot more than what the common NPC is.
Yeah. So to achieve that, to even get to where it's a playable character, like you're skipping the young part of whatever your race is, and then now you're into what this is, and then by the time you're old enough to be what would be like, an ancient dragon, your character's old and withered and not good to be in combat anymore. So again, what you play is the adult portion, but a dragon, being what they are, they're strong enough to be combatant in all stages of their life. So it's going to be a child can still kill a bunch of people, but it's weaker than the adult version who can just slaughter entire towns. And then by the time
TBK all day.
Yeah, and then by the time they're an ancient dragon, they've been around long enough, they've grown all this power, they can do crazy things. And then they also mentioned the fact that dragons never stop growing in their lives. Like most creatures, they grow in their youth, and by the time they hit adulthood, they're done growing. So it's kind of explained that a young dragon is going to be like the size of a bus. An adult dragon is going to be 3 buses parked end to end. So there's going to be more power, more strength, more everything.
There's more there, yeah.
There's more there. So it's a totally different creature at that point you're fighting. And then an ancient dragon, because it's still been growing its entire life, is like the size of a skyscraper laid on its side.
Yeah.
So there's going to be more power in the bigger creature. So that's why they have different levels as well. So I thought that was a really cool take on it as well.
What do you think, Cameron?
I mean, I agree with just about everything y'all said. Like, it's in terms of the strength of a newborn dragon as to a newborn human or half-orc or whatever other race, they're going to be just naturally stronger. And as well, the wisdom of the ability to age essentially infinitely rather than several years or even several hundred years. They can just live immortally. And so, it's a lot of different mixture of things that you could use as an explanation of why there are multiple different types of dragon, per se.
It does bring up an interesting idea that I think would be kind of fun to play around with, maybe in like a one-shot or a six-shooter or something, where the beginning of your campaign, you have your group start out as children, and you have them as children play basically all one class. And then the next, you play that for the first 2 games, and then the next 2 games you're in young adulthood, and now they're all a different class because they're basically experiencing life in different ways now, right? Like, you don't start out your life knowing that you want to be a TikToker or knowing that you're going to be a chef or whatever. So, or knowing that you're going to work at a bank.
I wanted to work construction when I was a child.
Exactly. So, just basically have, like, everyone in the first stages is, like, from, 10 to 15 years old, right? But they're all level 1 barbarians because kids are wild. Or barbarians or fighters. They can choose between the two. And then you have them run a couple encounters and stuff like that. Well, then the next 2 games, you jump to a second part of their life, which is, like, 15 to 25. And in that area, now they're a little bit more refined. Like, you can have them pick between rogue and fighter and what else? Maybe like some kind of caster.
Yeah, so maybe magical abilities develop, as a teenager or whatever. So then you become a caster.
Yeah, and then from 25 to 45, you have and each time you're playing the different age group, you let them level up by 2 levels, but in this new class. And so you can have them basically be multi-classed in like 4 or 5 different things, which would be kind of interesting. And then by the time they get to their older age, well, now they're just casters, or they're just a single class by the end of it. And I don't know, I just think that'd be kind of funny, kind of interesting. Like, play them as he described.
It's different. It's like, definitely different. Mm-hmm. Just, the growth in life.
Yeah, because not everyone grows up as like, well, I was a wild and crazy kid, so I guess I'm just going to be wild and crazy forever, So,
unless you're me.
Yeah, unless you're bored as noodles, and then you can just be wild and crazy for the rest of your life. Well, I think let's call it there, and you guys can ruminate on the idea of playing a 6-shooter where every 2 games you let them age up in class change and level up. So as we normally do with this podcast, at the end of our show, we give little quips and jokes and little stories or whatever. So we will do those now. And since Cameron, you rolled the highest, you are now required to go first in your quip.
All right, my quip for the end of this here is going to be, since I do plan on playing a wizard possibly next time, and I'm also a cook, I guess my weapon's going to have to be cast iron. So stupid, I know. I'm sorry.
I like it. I think I do want to say I think Kayla used that one last episode.
Damn it.
Yeah, it's good though. I do like it. Trevor?
So my warlock got hit in the face pretty hard last session, and he lost a tooth. Now he has to wear braces of defense.
God damn it. Piece of shit. Okay. What would you guys call an ant in a blizzard? Shiver me timbers. Get it? Because he's
wood.
A tree.
Yeah, an ant.
And then, because the snow is cold.
Did you say an ant or an ant? It really sounded like you said ant.
Int.
Okay. All right.
It's an int. Like a tree int.
Yes.
Like from Lord of the Rings. Like how they say int.
Yes.
Like tree beard.
No, I'm tired of your attitude, Trevor. You're a sassy conductor, and I don't like it.
Good news, Bruce. the podcast is over. You don't have to listen to my shit no more, okay?
Good.
Good.
I don't want to talk to you until the next time we record this podcast, or I talk to you before then.
Oh.
Tomorrow when we play D&D.
Yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow. But no one
Okay.
else will hear that conversation until we record again. So join us next time on...
Love you, Trevor.
So, housekeeping.
Yes, housekeeping. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you,
Whether
Cameron.
you found us... I was going to get to that.
Oh,
Fuck.
fuck. God damn it. Thank you, Cameron,
You
also known
can't-
as Bored as Noodles on TikTok. Check him out. Very funny creator. All around good guy. All about them positive vibes. And
He's
keeping
man.
your life in a positive manner. So check out my man, Bored as Noodles on TikTok.
Thank you all for listening, whether you were sent here by a friend, or you found us, or you're a friend of ours, in which case, if you don't listen to us, I swear to God, I'll find you. I mean, thank you again to Carter for our intro. Remember that we do not advertise. You guys are our AOE, which is Area of Effect. You guys spreading the word or sharing it with a friend or someone you think might like it, or, your dungeon master who's maybe running into some roadblocks, or I think they call it dungeon master block, kind of like writer's block. Send them our way for ideas. Remember, you can send your questions to us by following us on social medias. You can find us on just about every social media by typing in @SitDMs1. That is SITDMS1. You can shoot us a message on there, slide into our DMs, and we will do our best to answer your question. I think that's about it. Thank you again to Cameron. We appreciate you. We look forward to having you on another time as well. Maybe in the next episode. We'll see. And as always, fare thee well and adventure onward.
Bye.
Spice.